This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall. CJAD 800.
That is James MENNIE. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. Jim, so let's start off with this idea that Quebec is now looking to attract foreign workers. You say, yeah, careful, don't call this immigration. What's going on?
Don't call it immigration, okay? It's more like how can I put it? A government-funded raiding party. How about that, as opposed to immigration? We are confronted with so bad a labor shortage that the Legault government has grudgingly launched a program. The program already exists. It's called Quebec Days, and basically it's like a job fair that they go around the world trying to promote Quebec and get people to come here to work. Last year's target was 1,500 people. I don't know how well that worked because this year's target is 3,000 people, and those numbers will probably go up. Indeed, Jean Boulet, who is the Labor Minister of Quebec and, coincidentally, is also the Minister of Immigration, said that by 2030 they expect to have 1.4 million, with an M, jobs to fill in Quebec. So things are getting very grim. Now, even though every single person who's got skin in the game, which is to say every single business person in Quebec, every single manufacturer has been screaming at the government, could you please increase your immigration levels? We need people in here. We need trained workers. We need untrained workers. We need bodies to fill the jobs. Well, that ain't going to happen. In fact, the Minister of Immigration/Labor made it clear that despite the labor shortage, we are not going to be increasing our levels beyond 50,000 a year. So presumably those 3,000 will also be part of the 50,000, which is once again an example of how the Legault government likes to make a big noise about pretending to solve a problem when in fact it's doing nothing more than, it's paying lip service to the whole idea. Everyone in Quebec except Francois Legault says the answer to our problem is increased immigration levels. You want for criterion on them? That's fine, but get the bodies in here. That is not happening. And I got to tell you, this may come back to bite Mr. Legault between now and October's election, because it is becoming increasingly clear that labor shortage, which is not limited to Quebec, but certainly we're feeling the pinch. Mm-hmm. That labor shortage is making itself felt as painfully as inflation here in Quebec, because if you go to order something, for example, from a manufacturer, you're talking about months. They may as well be shipping it to you from a colony on Mars by the time it gets to your house. And this is something I think a lot of our listeners have already gone through. And folks, I got to tell you. Plus, did I mention those 17 countries have to be French speaking? Because that's right. Part of the criteria.
Do they also have to be doctors and, like that?
No, ideally, Natasha, they have to be billionaires.
Right,
okay?
Of course.
Francois Legault wants francophone billionaires to immigrate to Quebec. But apart from that, no, they're looking for IT. They're looking, guess what, healthcare workers. They're looking for engineers, which I find rather intriguing, because I thought we were churning out engineers 20 to the dozen. And these are like good jobs, right? And no one seems to be around to fill them. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Francois Legault can truckle to the isolationists and the xenophobes who make a certain amount of the CAQ support to make sure Quebec is not inundated by immigrants who would actually work and make the province go. And the fact that he also has to answer to a business community, many of whom voted for him thinking, we'll get rid of all this nonsense now with the uncertainty of separation. We're not getting an answer. We're not getting a solution out of Francois Legault. Just a lot of slogans, and it's becoming an increasingly dangerous trend for a guy who's looking to be reelected.
But you know what? This is interesting because here he is heading into a campaign, right, into an election campaign. And you're right, in the regions where he's where the party's so strong, they're the ones experiencing this labor shortage even more than we are.
They are getting hammered, and they are getting increasingly desperate as well, because what you need out there are bodies. And it was tough enough of a sell because, a lot of people, first of all, don't know how vast Quebec actually is. So in many cases, you're talking about, you're not just putting Montreal behind you, sometimes you're putting the time zone behind you. And it is, to a certain extent, a challenge, a sacrifice. But if there are people out there who are willing to take that up, apparently they have to be Francophones, and they have to be one of the 50,000 who will, presumably be let in by Quebec's immigration department. So, as they say, only time will tell. But right now, there's nothing to indicate that the delays we're facing, the lack of productivity, the brakes that are being put on any kind of economic recovery for Quebec are going to be gone anytime soon.
Speaking of Quebec being so vast, as you were saying that, I was thinking about Legault with these $500 flights and how that seems to change every day what it entails, right? Oh, well, it's for everybody. Oh, well, no, not everybody. What's the latest on this now?
I was going to talk about this last week, and of course, events took over. And I thought, you know what? It's a good idea. What a smart move during an election campaign, especially when most of your support is in the regions. You make it cheaper for people to travel, to and from those regions.
Right.
The maximum is going to be $500. That's one announcement from François Legault. The next day, the Transport Minister, François Bonnardel, points out, oh, by the way, that $500 ceiling on airfares applies to Quebecers and tourists, full stop. And he says it doesn't apply to Canadians, which is like, are you serious? But wait, folks, there's more, or perhaps, the way you look at it, even less. It turns out that when François Legault announces this, last week, the last people to know that this was coming down the pike were the people running Quebec's regional airline.
Of course, yeah.
Thanks to, and I got to tell you, a tip of the hat to Radio Canada, because they're the one. But that said, they didn't have to do a deep dive. They just basically called up airlines saying, well, what do you think about this? And they said, we just found out about this at the press conference. We have no idea how this is going to work. We have no idea what the price structure is going to be like. We have no idea how we're going to be compensated for this. But in the meantime, our switchboards are melting because people want to have, information on this. Oh, by the way, I already bought a ticket at full price. Do I get a refund for the difference? In other words, this announcement made with no small amount of pomp and circumstance by everyone's favorite Peter turns out to have been something that, as I said before, he probably thought up 6 minutes before he stood in front of a microphone.
But, Jim, this is so typical, isn't it, of the way CAQ makes decisions? Think about the school board decision here. We hear this over and over again. This is just how they do business.
It's, the one single most used word that I've been using on this show for the past 4 years is improvisation. Yeah. I said they spin a wheel in the bunker. They have a big dartboard with ideas on it. But it goes to show you, and we've had this conversation on a more broad issue. In terms of the coverage that this government gets, right now Radcan is the only one to have run with this story. And I can remember there would be a time this would be everywhere, wall to wall. And to a certain extent, this is a legacy of what we went through in the pandemic, where you just had one source reporting, where you just, we're too busy, we have to move on, there's something else going on. But this is a perfect example. This was clearly an election promise aimed at his constituency, and one that apparently has no basis in reality. And when Radcan tried to get details on this from, a premier, well, you have to call Transport Quebec. And Transport Quebec says, well, we'll be getting back to you in a few weeks there. We're just hammering out the details. I think they're putting together the details because they didn't have any to start with,
Just so it's so crazy. And on the other hand, it's the kind of thing where people can understand you might have done this once, right? Oh, you forgot to get a hold of someone. Yeah. They do this time after time after time. I wonder why the opposition hasn't seized on this.
Well, once again, that's the other most posed question I think I've heard from you in the past 4 years is why don't they? Now is their chance. They should be jumping on this with both feet because it's utterly understandable. It's not arcane government policy, and it is downright stupid. It's just completely ridiculous. It's the kind of amateur hour you'd expect from a government that is in power for 3 months. This government's been in power for 4 years. Okay?
I was going to say, unless the ulterior motive here, Jim, all along is, hey, it's an election coming up. This will sound good to run into an election with no real idea to want to actually implement this, right?
Well, they just blasted their foot off about 6 months before the election. So this ain't this is not a Machiavellian move as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, and when you ask about the opposition, I mean, that's nothing new. They always seem to be kind of missing the boat. Big stuff happens in there. They seem to be like the last ones to find out about it.
And I am really, well, the Parti Québécois is basically sort of like sitting alone in a darkened room sobbing. So that's their excuse.
All right.
The Liberals, I cannot figure it out. If they want to survive, and if you want to change the channel and you're bungling on Bill 96, here's a good chance.
Yeah.
And maybe, I'll apologize in advance once again. They might be doing it right now. They might be doing it even as we speak, but I've been watching this story all day. And apart from this story, I haven't seen any reaction to it. So, this is... I hate to think that the CAQ is going to dumb luck its way back into office, into an even bigger majority, especially when it's basically made a fool of itself in what should basically be its own territory. I'm not going to be losing any sleep over how much it's going to cost me to fly to Rivière du Loup, but I think there are a lot of people out there who voted CAQ, who may have had their hopes come up and just called the airlines right away saying, okay, when can I get my ticket? And are being told, we have no idea, madame.
But therein lies the answer to the question, why do they keep pulling these kinds of stunts? Because they get away with it.
Well, they get away with it.
They get called on the carpet, yeah.
Right, but it's also that because they don't know what they're doing. I mean, I guarantee you, probably somebody on the weekend, the last weekend, somebody said, yeah, that'd be a good idea. That'll sell very well. I mean, how much could it possibly cost? Yeah. But then they ended it there. They make the announcement, and you've got. I mean, as I say, this is not the airlines, the regional airlines, playing defense. They all have the same story. We had no idea this was going on. And right now, we're not getting any information from the government. But it's our phones that are ringing. They're not calling Francois Legault. They're not calling Bonafidel. They're calling us.
Right.
By the way, just on a side political note here, since we're talking politics, we just got confirmation that Eric Duhaime, the leader of the Conservative Party of Quebec, is going to join us on Wednesday and basically do the same thing we did with Dominic Anglade. He's going to take calls from our listeners so you get a better idea of who and what he's all about. So just wanted to mention that. Now, Jim, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Adama.